Okay, so I was asked to kind of do a little video about the Princeton, the Fender Princeton model in the Line 6 Helix. I think this is based on Ben Adrian's real Princeton Reverb amp that he owns. If you're wondering who uses a Princeton or has used a Princeton, Steve Lukather is one of the biggest names for a guy who was using a Paul Revere modded one back in the kind of 70s and 80s in his session work. Bill Frisell uses one, Ben Monder uses one. I think generally, not necessarily a gigging amp. Chris Stapleton has a signature Princeton, which I guess he gigs with, but in general, kind of perfect for studio stuff. You know, like a step above a Fender Champ, which at the time would have been their most budget amp, and then after that comes the Princeton in their catalogue and stuff, and this would be like the amp that's kind of more studio rehearsal friendly, maybe small venues as well. Certainly these days when you're miking stuff up and you want a quiet stage volume, a Princeton might be a perfectly valid choice for amp. Now we've also got two choices of cabs to go for in the amp itself. So they modelled 1x10 US Princeton, so you know, like a traditional 10-inch speaker in a Princeton, which is what you'd end up with generally. And then probably one of the most common mods that you might do with a Princeton Reverb is to put in a 12-inch speaker instead of that 10-inch speaker. And in this case, they use an Alnico Blue. I think that's what's in Ben's actual Princeton. So maybe this might be a little bit contrary to what you might think, but for me, I feel like the 10-inch speaker is a little bit less scooped sounding. So that's 10-inch. The Alnico Blue. So that kind of went against what I might have thought. So for me personally, if I was going for kind of a thicker tone, I might choose that 10-inch speaker, and if I was going for something a bit more scooped or, you know, suiting humbuckers, I might use the Alnico Blue. Which seems to have a little bit more kick in the low mids. I do believe I'm using the same exact settings in terms of mic choices. Hopefully anyway, otherwise that's so I'm using a ribbon mic and a 47 condenser on both, and I think you'll probably agree that that's a bit more of a low mid heavy with the 10-inch speaker, which I guess would be a Jensen traditionally. So yeah, choice between having a Celestion Alnico Blue or the Jensen 10-inch. So, you know, you can try out this preset if you want to. Now, let's go to the model itself. I think the stock settings, you will have the mids at 7. Now, if this is anything like the rest of the amps, then traditionally, if you don't have the actual control, it should be at 5 or 0. So like the presence, there isn't a presence control on a Princeton, so that's set at 0. I think the mids control doesn't exist on the 65 blackface or the 68 silverface models, so this mid control I think should be turned to 5 to be most authentic. So that's the first thing that I've done. Aside from that, we've got everything at stock settings. So drive down at 2.7, and it's just a great clean tone, I think. Now, you could boost the bass. I noticed that this doesn't really tend to flub up when it's clean. So just adds quite a lot of body and doesn't really get too flubby at these gain settings. as we increase the drive, I think a Princeton doesn't necessarily have the smoothest drive traditionally. We'll use the channel volume just to kind of balance things out a bit without changing the tone. So as we get up to about 7.5, you get like a little bit of bark to it. And then with the other cab, so definitely I'm more mid-forward with the 10-inch speaker. As you crank the drive all the way up, it does remain pretty touch sensitive. But I'm imagining as we turn the bass up with this, you might get a little bit on the flubby side. So yeah, when you've got the drive a little bit higher, then certainly that lower bass setting makes a lot of sense. I guess starting with everything at 5 maybe. I do think even with the drive at 10, I think on a real Princeton, the ones that I've experienced with the Jensen 10-inch speaker, things would get quite spiky there, but we're in kind of nice territory for all of this. Now, pedals that I think pair with it quite well, the Timmy. I think that works really nicely. It doesn't have that too much of a mid boost. So that's everything at 12 o'clock, except I've changed the clipping to be center. Just a really nice kind of transparent overdrive. And also, I think a tube screamer works quite nicely, but might even suit the Alnico Blue a little bit more, as that's a bit more mid-scooped, so the screamer is kind of bringing out some of those frequencies that are missing. Versus you can maybe get a little bit congested in the mids if you're using the 10-inch speaker with the Scream 808 versus the Alnico Blue, where it's kind of just filling up that space which is scooped out. And then okay, so Timmy I really like with it, and the Tube Screamer I really like with it as well. Those two stack quite nicely. Obviously, being a single channel amp, typically you would see people using real pedals with these, so I think pedals in front of the Princeton is definitely a familiar sound for most folks. I've put the tremolo in here between the amp and cab, and Also, those are the settings there, so you could, you know, the actual amp itself has a tremolo circuit. So I've just got that set subtly with a fairly low speed at 2.6 and the intensity is down at 3.9. Now you could turn that up and have a bit more of a pronounced effect, but I kind of like it as a subtle thing. And then also the Hot Springs reverb. Now typically Fender amps have quite a lively reverb, I'd say. So I've set the dwell up to 10, spring count high at 3, and then the drip high. I've brought the high cut up a bit as well. The mix is down at 29% and it's set to a parallel path. So it's not necessarily overwhelming, but you know, you could experiment with that yourself. And I've got a studio compressor after the reverb before the cab, just to kind of smooth out the reverb a bit, I guess, and give some more length to the tail. And then just a transistor tape with the spread wide and a low mix at 13%. Obviously a Princeton doesn't have an effects loop, so typically I guess you'd be putting it before the amp, but I'm kind of treating this like a studio delay or studio tape machine, and with all of this running in here. Now I'll put together a preset and I'll do it so it's available on Stomp and Podgo as well, I think. But I really like this amp, particularly with that 10-inch speaker. It's quite forgiving. And takes pedals rather well. And I think those stock settings work really nicely too. The only thing I might do is take that mid down to 5 just to get that authenticity. And you know, maybe you push that drive up a little bit. But I definitely prefer the sound of the 10-inch for this Telecaster. So yeah, a great, I think, a model. Really lively response to kind of your playing and your picking, and doesn't really need any tweaking, I think, to be sounding great. So I'll save that and I'll go and put together an intro now. Hopefully that was vaguely interesting to one or two of you. I know some people are definitely huge fans of this Princeton model, and I think I put myself in that category. I love using this one for jazz, and you know, for anything really. I think it's got just a classic warm Fender tone. Catch you another video soon. Cheers.